Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us today to stay curious and have a bunch of answers to your questions from the one and only Mike Leinbach. Get it out
Hey,
there.
Mark.
Let me spit
Hi,
it out
folks.
there. Welcome to our show. You've been here before, and you launched 37 space shuttles, the last ones of the great three-decade era that you know we love to tout, and you help us with that. How you been, Mike? We hadn't seen you in a while.
Well, it's been a little while, about a year or so since I've been here, but no, doing fine. Just enjoying retirement and being able to sleep in and do things that whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. It's retirement's a great gig.
Yeah, that alarm clock was very important in your life, I'm sure, at one point in time with launches at 2 in the
Oh yeah,
morning and 2 in the afternoon.
yeah.
And
Now it only wakes me up for doctor's appointments.
yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
Yeah.
And we need a few to remind us of that every day. But we're going to enjoy your questions and answers. We got a few surprise questions from some of his friends that he put a few of them into space. And if you've got any questions, my partner in crime and co-producer Marty Winkle. Marty, how are you? Marty will take your question and read it off there.
Yeah, I'm doing good, Mark. How are you?
Good. We're ending the week on episode 976 in our little almost 4-year keeping people curious. Born out of the pandemic, Mike, we just can't believe how we've attracted people like you and other people that want to share your story, and we were very, very grateful for that.
Oh,
As I fix this here, we couldn't be doing these number of shows without you A-list people, is the way I put it.
well, I'm happy to be here. I really, truly am, and I had no idea you're up almost 1,000 episodes now.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, Karan will be calling you for the big party and stuff like
Okay,
that.
we're gonna have
going
a
on there.
thousandth episode.
Well,
party.
I guess they're going to do something.
Well, we
We have
should.
to. They stormed this. They stormed the set when we had 100 shows.
Okay.
All right, and then 200, 300. But we're very blessed. We're blessed with people like Dave Stange out there in Michigan, who's got a question for you, Mike.
Okay.
We'll talk about here in a minute. But let's kick it off here. We do have an important memorial. This is what is called NASA's Darkest Week, and we have never taken that approach. We want to celebrate the lives of these people.
They were special people and obviously gave it all for the program and for the country and really for the world. And to be able to get together every year and celebrate them and remember the sacrifices and remember their families, it's a very important thing to do.
The event was at the Mirror yesterday. Did you attend that?
You know, I couldn't attend yesterday.
Okay.
But, no, I've been 95% of them. But
Yeah, I
couldn't
didn't
make
go
yesterday.
either. It's very traditional that the Astronaut Memorial Foundation has a celebration out there. And I've been so busy today, and you'll see why here in a minute, getting ready for this event.
Okay.
And we have Mike McCulley speaking.
He'll do a great job.
You know Mike very well.
Yeah.
Probably you know him better as president of the United Space Alliance. And the
Yeah,
great job he did as a leader there. He's, of course, a pilot on STS-34.
Yep, flew once and then went into management on the contractor side and was a terrific ASM, the support manager, and just did a terrific job. Everybody loved him and loved working for him, and it was a great relationship when he was there.
Well, he's been one of our stalwart supporters at the American Space Museum, Mike is, and he'll have a great message to deliver. You have done this honor before. I love it. It's very patriotic, and if you don't get the goosebumps in your arms and a few tears in your eyes during this event, I think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But we're here to talk with Mike, and he said, Mark, please ask me whatever you want, whatever's on your mind. So if you haven't sent in a question, we'll give it to you there. But we had so as we're waiting to give you a few in a minute here, but we want to let everybody know we had this gentleman, Lowell Grissom, in the museum there with Karan Conklin, our executive director. He's been coming to the museum, I think, since its inception, really over 20 years. Lowell's 90 years old. I got him to sit down and talk a few minutes about his brother. What's the best book to read about his brother? He'll tell you when we air that next Tuesday.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Yeah, he had a posse of friends coming here from his a new museum in Missouri that's going to honor the Mercury and Skylab program particularly. But thanks, Karan, for Karen's really the reason why we've excelled and grown here. Her allowing her team to do what they want to do, and
Yeah,
you know a
she's
little bit
terrific.
about that.
Yeah.
She's not a micromanager, and you know. Me personally, thank you for the rope you give me. I've hung myself a few times on it, Mike, but that happens, right? But it strikes me as you're kind of a manager like that. Let people do their job.
Well, that was my philosophy on it. You know, if they needed to be a little course correction, I was happy to do that. But I was also happy to praise people in public, but let the people do their job. And they have the responsibility and the authority. Let them do it.
And it's a good balance there when you do that. Here's Anita Truex, one of our unsung employees here. She handles the gift shop. And Anita, Mike has brought me so many people. Every day she says, oh, so-and-so's touring, and they worked on Apollo and the command module. And we've got a lot of those people on our show here. And can't thank her enough. Her son's out there working for SpaceX. And
you ever had John Weaver on this program?
John Weaver was one of our early awesome programs back in the day.
Right?
He was Marty's boss. All right. And so you'll have to go back and hear the things he said about Marty. John's sitting here watching it. We have John in our studio.
John's here with us. That's why
Look,
I mentioned it.
He's my boss's boss.
Oh, okay. No, John was before we went to YouTube. We had to get 1,000 followers before we could go to YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And that took us about a year of Stay Curious. So he's on our Facebook side there. And so you can, I'll put John's rebroadcast up there someday on there. We've had a great week of guests. Don't know if you know Gary Allgaier or not.
Sure, yep.
Gary is what a great engineer he is to talk about these things in a very I call it just non-technical way. He talked Tuesday and Thursday about the Apollo 1 and Challenger accidents from his involvement. Apollo 1, wow. You see pictures that you've seen 1,000 times, and he points out things in there that you go, really? Yeah. That's what Ed White had to pull to get to a little tab behind his head to get to the tool to open up the hatch.
I was impressed by Gary. He was very down to earth, a terrific engineer, but very down to earth too. I always liked Gary.
And then there you got Terry White.
Yep.
I know you broke bread with him a few times.
Just a couple.
And he shared, particularly we talked a little bit about events in your book we're going to show here in a minute out in Texas and Louisiana, the recovery and all. But and then we were happy to have you here today. But Mike, what we really talked about, I'm going to show you this picture. There's a great little hammy picture of you doing your job there.
Yep.
What we talked about, in fact, I was talking with Ann Miklos today. She was in the museum today. We have her pictures for sale. And Ann and Terry and a lot of space workers talk about Columbia was the 8th crew member that you lost.
Yeah, that's really true. It's hard to describe to people that weren't in the program. But we got to know the orbiter so well, and the people took ownership of a particular orbiter and just loved the machine. And to say that, it was the 8th member of the crew, it sounds kind of almost disrespectful to the 7 astronauts that lost their lives. But for us here locally, there was that feeling like we'd lost another member of the crew. And we had people volunteering. They wanted to work on the reconstruction and the recovery of the debris because they did love Columbia and just had to be part of the final chapter in her life.
Yeah, that was incredible, the mobilization. We talked about that with Terry. It's in Mike's book here. I got another book here. I don't know if you know Mr. Lamar Russell.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And Lamar's very interesting introspect there. You can get this here at our museum. We're going to start giving this book away to people who join our museum here in a campaign we're going to do. But wow, talking about, the B-52s lined up to go to the Gulf War.
Oh, yeah.
To that, from the happiness of Bluebell ice cream everywhere you wanted for free.
Lamar was a key person out there. We asked him to head up all the recovery efforts elsewhere around the area so people in California would call in, and he would handle those reports of debris, and all the way from the California coast to Florida.
Wow.
And yeah, that was Lamar. He did all that.
But his little tome is very interesting to read, and of course we tout yours and your buddy there, co-author
Jonathan Ward,
right.
Who's now co-authored Eileen Collins' book.
That's right, and he does a great job. I know him, gotten to know him fairly well, and I bet you appreciate his detail-oriented detail and follow-up.
The book wouldn't have happened without Jonathan.
Yeah.
We were just 50-50 all the way through the whole thing, because it wouldn't happen without him, it wouldn't happen without me. And so we just very early on decided it was going to be a 50-50 kind of thing.
Well, that's a definitive Columbia book y'all want to read, and there's some interesting threads in their personal lives and personal triumphs and tragedies in there. And Dave Stange wanted to know, had you had any reunions? Dave Stange's up in Michigan up there.
Okay.
And so he wanted to know what was the largest and smallest piece of Columbia recovered, and how recent was the last piece found?
Well, let's see, the largest piece by size was a piece of the belly of the orbiter right between the wheel wells, and that was about 13 feet long, and it was bent up in the shape of an L, about 13 feet long and maybe 2.5 feet wide, something like that. Still had some tiles on it. And that was found early on, as you can well imagine. Then the smallest pieces, the smallest pieces were the size of your fingernail. So thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah. He wanted to know if there was any reunions.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I know that last year you had the big 20th reunion.
The big 20th was last February, and Belinda Gay and her husband Roger, they and Marcia, they put on the whole thing, and they did a terrific job. They do a special reunion every 5 years, but then this 20th, that was a big deal. And we had Sean O'Keefe there, the administrator at the time of the Columbia accident. He gave a terrific speech. And,
where was the central place there?
It was at the Baptist church in town.
In which town?
Hemp Hill.
Oh, Hemp Hill. Okay.
Hemp Hill, where they have a museum there dedicated to the Columbia.
Okay.
And that's a terrific little museum. I mean, I say little, I shouldn't have said little. It's a terrific museum. They have artifacts that the families have lent to them to put on display, and some interactive activities for the kids.
Find that off Interstate 10, going in that way.
Yeah, boy, it's a back road.
Okay.
I'm surprised I found it.
Thank God for GPSs these days. Well, there you go, Dave Stange. Thanks for breaking the ice with a question, Dave. There.
Appreciate the question.
He's one of our #1 followers and has donated money, and he might have his 1-year-old granddaughter watching, that he sends me pictures all the time in there. Marty, you have a question there from one of our viewers.
We have a question from Mark Uziak. Mike, when was the last time you spoke with world traveler Jonathan Ward? He said it's hard to keep track of our favorite sailor these days.
Yeah, he's on a cruise right now. I got an email from him this morning. As a matter of fact, I got asked him where he was at the current time, and he's somewhere between Hawaii and the Philippines, I believe.
Well, see, that's a tip-off that you don't Facebook, because if you Facebook, you know where Jonathan Ward is.
That's true. I do not Facebook.
He even shares a lot of his good meals he's having with us.
He's gotten into that gig of being an onboard astronomer.
Yes.
For the cruise lines, and is having a terrific time.
And taking his wife along too, which is even a better thing there. So, speaking again, you said Jonathan was the right person. Why was that?
Well, he was so interested in helping tell the story. We met at the memorial service for my boss that hired me into the shuttle program, Norm Carlson.
Oh, yes, okay.
And he helped Norm write his 2 books about the Apollo program. And so we met, and Jonathan came up to me and introduced himself, and one thing led to another. We had lunch the next day, and we decided to write a book, because I told him, I said I had started writing a book about Columbia and I couldn't finish it. And he said, well, if you want the help, I'll never forget this. He said, I'll do the heavy lifting. Jonathan said, I'll do the heavy lifting, and that meant he'll pull it all together. I'd write a lot of it, he'd write some of it, but he would pull it all together, and he damn sure did, and he did a terrific job.
Yeah, absolutely. As he did with Eileen Collins' book, Breaking the Glass Ceiling or something like
Mhm.
that. It is about her being the first pilot and then the first commander. And I'm blessed that I've been around her quite a few times. She's something else.
Oh, she's a
Eileen
special
Collins
person.
is, yeah.
Very special person.
I say special in a way. She's as interested in you as you are her.
Hmm.
She asks
That's
questions
just the way
about
she
you.
is.
Yeah.
And if you met her on the street, you'd never know that she was an astronaut
No.
and had all the success.
Not being
in the world.
derogatory, but you say, "Hey, have you got any of that Avon mosquito stuff on you there? You look like an Avon lady, which is good stuff."
That's good. I guess so.
Marty, you got a question?
Yeah, we have two questions. First one is from Steve J. Mike, are you planning on doing any more special tours at KSC Visitor Center?
Well, I was doing tours for the visitor center about 3 or 4 days a month, and I had to give that up for personal reasons. I gave a special tour about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so no, I still do a few, but I don't have that regularly scheduled tour anymore like I used to do, and I don't see that coming back, frankly.
Okay. Well, Marty bought me that tour for my birthday present 2 years ago, and
That was good.
And
Glad to have you.
it was awesome. It was awesome, Mayor, and that it was just Mike wants to be helpful wherever situation you're in, and we all love that about you. But I'll never forget that tour. Very honest about a lot of things and want people to ask questions and
Answer any question that was asked.
maybe someday, but we'll appreciate that you were there when I could do it. Another question, Marty.
Yes, from Tom Usiak. Mike, when Houston took control of the launch, did anyone in the LCC have the data from the orbiter that Houston was receiving?
Good question. And
Did
explain
anyone-
what
Say the question again.
Tom
I'm sorry.
Usiak
Yeah.
says that when the orbiter left the tower, and then it's handed off to Johnson Space
Yeah.
Center, are you still getting the same data that Johnson Space Center is
Yes,
getting?
we get the same data, but it
Correct
transitions.
me if I'm wrong, Tom.
It transitions into a monitor mode rather than a command capability. So
Oh.
before liftoff, if we needed to change a configuration on the vehicle, we could do that from the control room. After liftoff, that's all the Houston flight, the flight control team under the direction of the flight director.
So it's more just
So it was more just monitoring the data, and we would watch it very, very closely until negative return, 4.5 minutes into flight, just in case we got into that return to launch site abort scenario, which we never did.
mm-hmm.
Because if that had happened, then some of the folks at KSC would have been responsible for helping that whole situation on the runway. The flight director would still be in charge, but our landing recovery director and the local firefighters, that type thing, would jump into action if we'd ever had that return to launch site abort. So for the first 4.5 minutes, we were very, very interested in it. And then we would watch it go all the way to orbit. We'd watch the engines shut down and separate the external tank. And then they were in orbit, and then we were done. And then we could go down to the lobby and celebrate.
What if it had to land at one of the transoceanic abort landing sites?
Good question.
Who would be, and our good friend Dean Schaff.
Dean Schaff, ground operations manager.
Yeah.
We had KSC employees manning the abort landing sites around the world, the transatlantic abort landing sites, and never did that either, fortunately.
Right.
But had we done that, we had local people there to help the astronauts get off and secure the vehicle as much as possible.
In Spain, Morocco, North Africa.
Yep.
Up there. And
France.
we've talked about that on our stint here on Stay Curious. Another question, Marty, for Launch Director Mike Leinbach.
Yeah, from Mark Usiak. Mike, has Blue Origin ever reached out or SpaceX for any advice for their operations?
Well, I don't know about Blue Origin. That they kind of came into the game after I retired, but for SpaceX, in those contracts for the commercial crew program and commercial resupply program, there were clauses written into those contracts that one or more of the KSC employees would be embedded into SpaceX with the specific purpose of getting our lessons learned explained to them, and then let SpaceX decide what they wanted to do about that particular situation. But there was a very, very conscious effort in the contract to put our people embedded with SpaceX, And at first they were a little reluctant to do that, but it was in the contract. And then after a while they realized that these people knew what they were talking about, and they were really there for the good of the overall space program, of explaining to SpaceX what we did in Shuttle and was it good or bad, should it be incorporated into SpaceX's policies and procedures or not, because it wasn't a good thing to do. So that, yeah, it was absolutely part of the plan and still is.
And amazing what they're doing. To throw in
it's
there the
incredible.
12 human space flights, okay?
Yeah, I'm
And
amazed.
counting. Well, we've got a question here from this friend of yours, one of the old timers there, Mr. John Tribe and his wife Melinda.
Hey guys.
He says this: rumor has it that Columbia remains, that the remains of Shuttle Columbia that are currently reside in the VAB are to be moved. Does Mike know what is planned?
Well, I do, and I work with Mike Cianelli quite a bit. I'm sure he's been on.
No, he's not.
He is
Love to have
not.
him on Stay
Oh
Curious.
my gosh, well you're missing a good resource there.
Well,
but Mike
steer him in
Cianelli,
my direction.
I absolutely will. He's the program manager for the Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program.
Okay.
And as part of that now he's the curator for the Columbia debris and the Challenger debris. And so he's the point person for all of that. So you need to get him on the show, and he would love to do it. After stacking started for the Artemis program and the Space Launch System rocket, the VAB became an ordnance facility because of the live segments.
Ooh, yeah.
And so tours into the VAB to see Columbia. Columbia is on the 16th floor of Tower A. They became very, very limited. Only special people got into the tours, and so Mike wants to do something else with that debris, and they've located a room in OSB 1. It's the old gym on the first floor of OSB 1. And once they get the funding for that, they'll start moving the debris over there, and then that room will be opened up 24 hours a day. So anybody can go in that room and look at the debris. It'll be behind, in display cases or whatnot. But it no longer will there be a need for a tour guide, so to speak. And so that's going to open it up to a lot more people. It's a great plan. They're looking for the money to do that now. It's not cheap to move all that stuff, as you can imagine. But right now, the tours of Columbia are very, very limited because it is an ordnance facility. So to get away from that, they're going to move it into OSB 1.
That is a great question and answer there from Mr. John Tribe there, John, in front of the VAB. And we've had him on several times.
I'm sure. Yeah.
He's just
Terrific.
what a gentleman and expert in hypergolics. And we've had some great conversations with Mr. John Tribe. We want Melinda on, but she won't do it.
Oh, Melinda, come on.
Yeah, she. Marty, got a question there.
Yeah, my question, Mike, that gym, unless it grew in size over the years, is relatively small. So all of Columbia cannot fit in there. Are they?
Yeah, Marty's worked in that gym a lot. I'd say,
Yeah.
haven't you, Marty?
No, that's a good point. They're going to put out some select pieces in that room. Where the rest of it's going to go, I'm not quite sure yet. They're looking for another place to store the boxes, and there's a lot of debris from Columbia, and it's stored in these big cardboard boxes, and there are dozens of these boxes, and then the big tanks and all this stuff. So while it's going to be better for the workforce to go see Columbia, because you won't need a tour guide, you can't have it all in there. So they're going to have to split it up.
And someone may have the question, where are the remains of Challenger?
Challenger is buried in an old Minuteman missile silo on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, about 15 miles south of KSC. And Mike has just recently gotten a nice plaque put up to memorialize the fact that it's there. For years, for decades, it was just buried down in this missile silo with a concrete cap welded on, and never to be accessed again. And there wasn't even a recognition that it was in there. But imagine a Minuteman missile silo, 100, whatever diameter it is, 120 feet down the ground, and Challenger was lowered piece by piece down inside this missile silo. and then the concrete cap put on. And since the accident back in 86, it's only been accessed twice. Once back in the mid-90s, we had an issue with the main engines of the Space Shuttle. And since we recovered all three of Challenger's engines, we went down in the silo to look at those engines to see if they would help us solve the problem of the day. And then the second time Challenger was accessed was to get that piece for Forever Remembered that's in that big display case.
Right.
Other than that, Challenger is buried away and never to be seen again.
We'll see that piece here to end our show.
Okay.
Very moving tribute there at the Kennedy Space Center. Oh, and that was actually in the silo, and they didn't think enough to, display it. That's just
Nope, that was a decision that was made back in the late 80s, and there it is.
Great. Well, we are talking here with Mr. Mike Leinbach. A great conversation here. He'll answer any of your questions. I want to put this up here.
There we go.
Two of your predecessors there. We've got Mr. Bob Seek in the middle, who launched over 50 shuttles, and Mr. John Harrington.
Jim Harrington.
Jim Harrington. Early in the program there, if I can consult my shuttle scroll there, as you talk about these gentlemen here. Mr. Harrington really is, this is at our Shuttle Fest that you all participated in.
Right.
The late Mr. Hugh Harris introduced this panel discussion. And Marty, can you paraphrase what Mr. Hugh Harris said about these gentlemen?
No.
All right. He said he determined they have launched 3/4 of all the human space flights in all eternity.
Wow.
That's what Hugh said.
Wow.
Together, y'all did about 100 of the 135 launches in there.
Well, SpaceX is catching up to that very quickly.
Yeah, they certainly are. But anyway, Bob Seek, of course, has been our board member here, real solid supporter of our museum. Mr. Harrington, I got to know at this thing. Your mentors?
Yeah, both of them. Absolutely, no question about it. Bob, I was Bob's assistant launch director for a period of time. Mr. Harrington, just a special person. Nice as he can be, a good Southern gentleman. Yeah, and he could be tough at times too. But that's what makes a good leader, I believe. You got to combine the easy and the hard, and he was very good at doing that.
Yeah, I've said that leadership's not a popularity contest.
No.
And I look back at some of the bosses I might not have liked so well, got the most out of me, back in the day. But what is the special thing that you have to do to be a launch director? What is the special if there's a thing?
Well, I guess if I had to point to one thing, it's being able to take in multiple pieces of information, data, and make a tough decision on the fly. All the while being, number one was protecting the crew, the flight crew, and then the ground crews when they were out at the launch pad after we loaded the external tank. The safety of those folks is absolutely number one. We always wanted to launch, but that was always secondary. And you just had to have that way about you that you could be. It's like the duck on the pond, right? Your nerves are going on the inside, but you're just slow and steady on the surface. Because if a launch director was kind of nervous or rattled a little bit, well, that would translate down into the launch team, and you don't want that. So you had to have that personality of being able to accept good information, bad information, and make the best decision you can on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you think it would help to be a
you also had to be able to say, no, we're not going to launch today in the face of everybody else being go. Everybody in that whole room and Johnson Space Center around the world could be go, but if the launch director was not go, we'd stay on the ground that day. And that would be a difficult thing to do, to stand up and say no go in the face of everybody else being go.
Well, I have thought a few times about that decision with Mr. Gene Thomas, who was the launch director for the ill-fated Challenger launch.
Correct. Right.
Don't know anything about that gentleman, but could he have said no?
Absolutely. but he didn't have the information in order to base a no-go decision on.
Mm-hmm.
That whole discussion about the O-rings in the solid rocket booster for Challenger the night before, that information never made it to Gene. It never made it to the launch director. It stopped at a mid-level NASA manager.
Well, that's an interesting point I've not
And
heard.
we corrected that as part of the return to flight process. But had Gene heard that discussion, I'm sure he would have been no-go.
Mhm.
But he didn't hear any of that discussion at all. It wasn't brought to his attention at all. And he met all of his launch commit criteria and gave the go for launch.
Well,
But that affected him. I mean, he wrote a terrific book about it, but it affected him so deeply that that was his last launch. He couldn't go back and do it.
Mr. Harrington took over from there, I believe. Well, on a happier side here, I look at these three people here, and I'm wondering, is it good to be a Cavalier from the University of Virginia?
Well, two of those three people are.
Aren't they, though?
How about that?
Yeah. And one of our favorite astronauts
A couple
is,
of our
too.
astronauts are, too.
Kathy Thornton.
Kathy Thornton and
Who else?
Leland Melvin,
Oh, Leland Melvin's from
Yep,
University of
he's-
Charlottesville.
yep.
Or I say University of Charlottesville.
University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank, and there's like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah. Well, that's I was in Bristol, Virginia area, the forgotten part of Southwest Virginia there and up there. But I find that interesting, and that you both were graduates there. You want to comment about your alma mater? Go ahead, Darren.
It's just a great place, and I remember one countdown. I was a test director. I wasn't the launch director, but I was a NASA test director, chief NASA test director for that flight, and Kathy was on board. And the crew, for whatever reason, on their intercom system, so it wasn't broadcast out to the world, on their intercom system, they started singing their college fight songs.
Oh,
And so when Kathy came around and got into the UVA fight song, I kind of hummed along with her, And I'm not, and the test director is not supposed to be on the intercom and talk on the intercom. We have it on for purpose, but you're not supposed to use it unless you absolutely have to. So, but I hummed along with her.
have you ever asked to go back there and be at any event, like a basketball game or something like that, as one of the alumni there?
No, I don't like doing that stuff.
Well, I didn't say you would do it. But I wondered if you were asked to do it. But yes, he's very humble. But I know that when you speak, you mean what you say, and you're that's what we observe about these launch directors here. Seeks now doesn't mince words, and he's a man of few words too.
That's right.
Most of the
That's
time.
right. No, he's a great
In there.
guy.
But I love Bob Seek, man. He is. You people don't understand how Mr. Bob Seek, with Mr. Jay Honeycutt and a few others, helped shape the management side of the shuttle. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. Especially after Challenger, and then again, well, after Challenger, and it put in place different checks and balances so that, like, that information that never made it up to the launch director, we put in place a process where we would capture that type of information and make it available to the launch director for his decision making. So yeah, they changed that significantly.
Well, we're enjoying some questions and answers with Launch Director Mike Leinbach, enjoying his retirement. And this was some news business there that I wanted to throw out there, just kind of what's happening today. You see what's going on today. This is the JAXA Japanese lander that is the photos taken from a tennis ball sized rover that was built by the Transformer Company, those toys that I'm way too old to have played with. Isn't that incredible?
That's amazing.
It actually was supposed to lay on its side, but something pushed it over. So they're just waiting for a gentle lunar wind there to blow it over there. But so what do you think about what's going on today and everybody wanting to go to the moon?
Oh, it's terrific. And one of my best buddies, Steve Altimus, is the head of a company is developing a moon landing vehicle. So yeah, it's spreading. I mean, the future of space travel is terrific. We're right in the middle of a big growth spurt, and I don't see it ending at all.
Yeah, we call it the rocket renaissance around
Exactly
here.
right.
In there. Marty, a question for Mike.
We have 3 questions. First question from Steve J. Speaking about dynamic leaders, Mike, have you had any significant interactions with the late Chris Kraft?
No, I never did anything with Chris Kraft. Never met him. Nothing. I was before my time.
Okay. Thank you, Steve Yokums. He's up there in Illinois.
Okay.
He's up there. We appreciate his support of the American Space
Yeah,
Museum.
thank you, Steve.
Okay, next question from Mark Usiak. What was the quality of Charlie Blackwell Thompson that you saw to make her the Artemis launch director?
Charlie had that ability to bring a team together greater than anybody I think I've ever known. She as the test director and the chief of the NASA test director's office had significant responsibilities, and she excelled at all of them. And so for me, it was an easy recommendation to make that she could pull that team together, and knowing that it was going to be years, before the first flight, and you needed a good leader that could keep the team together, keep them motivated, and she was the right person for that job. There was not even a close second. I mean, she was number one and number one only. So, but it was her leadership ability and being able to hold the team together through those years of waiting and analyses and more analyses, and then we finally launched, and she did a great job.
Marty, a good follow-up is the question that you have on the next to you there from, go ahead and read that one on the top. I think, from Michael Jasky.
Okay, from Michael, what do you keep a launch team? I'm sorry. How do you keep a launch team motivated and sharp when your launch rate is so low, like SLS?
Yeah, I mean that's. I wish Charlie was sitting here to be able to answer that question. Training helps. Launch countdown training helps. Going out and socializing with the people that helps. It can't be all just routine work day after day after day. You have to get to know the people and go out to dinner with them and have softball games together. And I'm sure Charlie's done all that kind of stuff. And it was a tough time. I mean, think about it. The shuttle shut down in 2011, and the first flight of SLS was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So almost a 10-year gap, and very difficult thing to keep a team together, and not to mention the fact that only a few of the shuttle launch team members stayed on through SLS, and so she had a bunch of new people on the launch team that needed to get that feeling of being a prime launch team member, and so they went through different training exercises and stand boards where you get anointed as a prime launch team member, and that helps. But it's just that camaraderie that comes, and that it builds over time. It builds on itself. I always like to tell the story that we worked together with the shuttle launch team for so many years that I could tell by the tone of an engineer's voice whether he or she had conviction in what they were saying. Because I knew them personally, and I could tell that they said, "Yeah, Mike, this is the way it is," or "This is the way. This is kind of the way it is." Or I could absolutely tell just by the tone of their voice how they were feeling about the decision that they were making, and that only comes with time and trust. Trust had so much to do with that job that the launch director, we were good at seeing how the different systems played together. We were not experts in any one system at all. We had the launch team to do that, but to pull the teams together, and that's the job of the launch directors. Is pull those diverse people together, and have them act as a unified, as a coherent team. And it was glorious to watch. It was truly spectacular to watch them succeed.
Well put there. Marty, you have another one you want to do?
Yeah, we have one from Gary Jarrell. Mike, what was your thoughts when you learned of the debris strike on Columbia?
Well, like a lot of people, I didn't know how bad it was. We talked about it for the whole 16-day mission. Concluded incorrectly that it was not a safety of flight issue, obviously. And part of that had to do with we weren't sure the size of the debris and where exactly it hit the orbiter. We had to make a lot of assumptions, and then we used a computer program to extrapolate how bad the damage to the tiles could be. But this particular program, and it's the only program we had that would predict damage to tiles, and it was based on ice hitting tile. It was not based on foam hitting anything. It wasn't based on foam at all. And to the best of our knowledge, the foam hit somewhere between the leading edge of the wing and the first row of the tiles, or maybe the second row of the tiles. But we used that program and extrapolated, had to make assumptions on the inputs to that program. And then the output that concluded it was safe to fly, safe to come home, was based on inputs that we were essentially guessing at. Because we didn't have a good picture of where the debris actually hit, where the foam actually hit the orbiter, let alone a good picture of the damage to the orbiter. So we had assumptions in the model, we had assumptions on the damage and where on the vehicle it was, and it just got to the point where the computer program, we put all of our faith in that program and concluded it was safe to come home. It just wasn't.
Well, Marty, I've got a question here. You catch our breath there a little bit, just thinking of all that you say there, Mike. And there's a lot of books and things written about it. You touch on some of that, but nothing that to me fans the flame of like, we could have, should have, what we could have, should have, did have done. She didn't do on there, so.
No, it was terrible.
Yeah, go ahead. And I've got a question from an astronaut, Marty, but let's take your question.
Okay, we're going to take John Weaver's question. John?
Mike, this is a little on the lighter side. There's a story about the crawler transporter speeding to the pad that you were a principal in. Can you tell us about that?
Speeding to the pad. Well, I plead guilty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In the crawler transporter.
The crawler transporter speeding. Imagine that.
Yeah.
The max speed it can go is like 2 miles per hour, and that's with no vehicle on top of it. And with the shuttle stack on top of it, it was going about a mile and maybe 1.1 miles per hour. Well, somewhere along the line, there were some structural engineers who concluded that we should limit the speed of the crawler going out to the launch pad to 0.8 miles per hour. Because inside the aft, there were some harmonics of the hoses. There are different hoses back there for the engines and whatnot. And those harmonics set up, and it degraded the life of those hoses. Oof. And to avoid that, they say, well, if you go 0.8 miles per hour, you should be fine. You're not going to get into this harmonics. Well, I'm an old structural engineer. That's what my education and some experience before I came down here. I always thought that was a bunch of BS. But nevertheless, it became a program requirement, so we were limited to 0.8. Okay, so 0.8 miles per hour was our normal rollout speed. And it took 9 hours to get to the pad. Well, one day we were rolling out and a big weather system started coming at us. And I was faced with the decision of getting out to the pad and getting secured as fast as I could, or turn around, going back to the VAB and riding out the storm. Well, I wanted to go faster than 0.8 because it would get us there sooner. So I called my flight director buddies in Houston, and they called some of their structural engineers. And anyway, we got permission to go up to 1.0 miles per hour. So here we go. I remember calling Weaver, and Weaver said, "You want to do what?" And I said, "Yeah, we got to go a little faster." And he said, "Okay, I don't like it, but okay, we'll do it." And so we got the crawler transporter guys to speed up to 1.0 miles per hour. And of course, that raised all kinds of questions and concerns and good-hearted ribbing. And I got a speeding ticket that was generated for me because I went over 0.8. And I think, Weaver, you got something too. Didn't you get a parking fine or something like that?
I got a speed limit sign.
Speed limit sign, yep. And so no, it was done for good reasons, and we got out to the pad and got secured before the cloud hit us, and so everything was fine.
Well, the important thing of that story, who out there knew that the harmonics or the vibrations or the moving of an object would be translating through all the shuttle, and people worried about that affecting things? That is an incredibly engineering thought pattern there. What?
Yeah, and it was too incredible for me.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you for. Well, we sent a little email out to some of our astronaut friends, and by golly, we heard from 3 of them that had a question for Mike.
Oh, wow.
The first one is from this astronaut, Charlie Walker, the first company astronaut. Has been in our museum very, very easily. He's got a Schroeder's cat T-shirt on there. Walks into a bar in there. His question to you, Mike, is that Charlie, 3-time astronaut in the early days when they had the alphabet numbers and all that.
All right.
Question from Charlie, and he'll be here next week. Would Mike be willing to ride the emergency egress slide wire baskets at LC-39?
I tried so hard to ride that thing and I got turned down and turned down and
Did
turned
you
down.
really?
Yeah, I was a system engineer. But when I first started down here, I was in design engineering. And one of my projects was the slide wire system upgrade after Challenger. We went from 5 baskets to 7 and several other upgrades. And as part of that, we asked Charlie Bolden to ride the slide wire basket. He rode by himself once, and then it was ridden the second time by Charlie, Junior Bumgardner, who was the closeout crew chief, and George Hoggard, who was the fire chief for the pad rescue team. So that was the second ride, and the third ride was going to be Leinbach because I was the engineer, and I tried to convince people I need to listen to the gears and all this stuff, and see how it sounds, see if it's behaving properly from an acoustic perspective.
Okay.
Well, the center director was Bob Crippen at the time, and he essentially told me to go pound sand. and so he turned that down. But no, I would absolutely ride it. I wanted to, and I was about that close to being allowed to ride it.
So the egress emergency thing, there was only really human rated twice and two rides.
Two rides. Yep.
We knew Charlie Bolden had done it. And
those are the ones we can talk about.
That's right. That was we can talk about. Okay. Great question. Charlie's going to be the astronaut of the day out at the Space Center, I believe, next week. And we're going to have a conversation with him and take him out to dinner. We're going to take him out to Honeysuckle.
Yeah, that's good.
Up there.
Yeah, I like that.
He may have to bring his own beer, but I'm going to take him up there get him some good home cooking up there. Got a next slide. There's just a filler picture there of you there. I think you're probably still launching back then. Maybe not.
That's after I retired.
Give you an idea of your how the whole situation looks there. But this astronaut has a question. Winston Scott, and Winston's showing you how to give us $500 there on YouTube. There is a little tab there that says thanks with a $sign, and it starts at 20, and each little click there is an increment there. And we're letting you know that you need a tax deductible break. But Winston Scott, again, he's the chief of the astronauts out there at the Space Center, took over for Bruce Melnick, who took over for John McBride. He's got this interesting question, Mike. Besides the Columbia accident, what was the most difficult / toughest shuttle mission you ever worked? And what made it so challenging?
Oh, boy.
From astronaut Winston Scott there.
The launch countdowns, they really varied quite a bit from really easy, where we'd pick up the count and count on down, launch right on time, to other ones where we had different scrubs and we'd scrub 3 or 4 different times and then we'd finally launch. The most difficult, there was one once where there was another weather related. It was STS-105. And there was a big weather system down in southwestern Florida that was coming at us. It was coming across the big lake, Lake Okeechobee, and it was going to be up here at the launch site sometime during the launch window. And so knowing that, I wanted to launch as soon as possible. We had a 10-minute launch window. It was the International Space Station assembly mission. Mm-hmm. And so we only had a 10-minute launch window, but with that cloud coming at us, sooner or later, the local weather would turn no-go for rain or lightning or whatever the case may be. And so I wanted to launch as soon as possible. And so I worked with the flight director and got permission to launch at the beginning of the window rather than halfway through the window at the 5-minute point where we normally did. So we did that. We launched right at the beginning of the window, and about 20 minutes later, the local weather turned red. We would have been no-go. So we beat the cloud, but then as a result of that, there was a lot of discussion about is that the right thing to do or not. The launch window was always explained to me as that's the launch director's time. He or she can do within that launch window what they think is the right thing to do. And that day, the right thing to do was to launch early to beat that cloud, and we did. But there was a lot of discussion afterwards, and a new rule was developed that we can't launch early just for weather reasons. And so I had to promise the program manager that I would never launch early again for a weather-related issue.
That at 105 was August 2001 Discovery. That was the Leonardo unit going up, and there was a transfer of crew up there. Horowitz and Stutkow
Yeah,
were
sure.
who you were talking to there.
Yeah.
You know what Stutkow's doing now, don't you?
Yeah, he's out there with Virgin. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I think
pilot.
he flew
I think he
last week or
Yeah.
was going to fly this week. He's a Virgin Galactic pilot up there.
Mm-hmm.
So great answer there for Winston Scott there. He said he'd
Thanks,
try to
Winston.
watch there. Marty, you have a question.
Yeah, so a follow-up then why have a window? I mean, if you have a 10-minute window and you can't launch for the first 5 minutes, why have a 10-minute window?
Well, I could have launched early for other reasons, for technical reasons. If that 10 minutes was still the launch director's time to play with, to launch within, but I just couldn't go early or late for that matter. I just couldn't adjust the preferred time, which is halfway through that 10-minute window, for weather reasons. And it had to do with abort landing sites up the East Coast, that if we launched at the beginning of the window, a couple of those emergency landing sites up the East Coast would have been unavailable. And so there was a moderate safety, a minor safety reason why you shouldn't launch at the beginning of the window, but nevertheless, that's the launch director's time.
And he's talking about municipal airports and so forth being ready up the coast and
all the
so
way up the
forth.
coast, or we land at a military base or a commercial airport, sure.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right, Marty. I threw this picture in here just to kind of comment that from time to time there's documentaries and interviews and things like that that I know you handle quite well. What's that side of the limelight like for you these days? Talking about something 10, 15 years ago, like we're putting you in the limelight today.
Yeah, it's part of the job. I knew I was getting into all this when I accepted the job, but I'm an extreme introvert, and so anybody out there that's an introvert, you still have a future, but I have to deal with my introversion, and so doing public events is not my bag, but I do it because it's a necessary thing to do.
Uh-huh. Well, good. You do a good job at it, of course, there. See, I'm an extrovert with an inferiority complex. People don't think that I get nervous, but I do, because, anyway, we're coming here to the end of a great program here with Mike Leinbach as usual. Doug Forrest is watching. He is an artist and works in Los Angeles. He's been watching the progress of your ship Endeavor out there.
Yeah, it should be raised and mated at the end of this month,
Right.
or maybe the beginning of February.
They should send you an invite out there to it.
I think for the grand opening.
Are you going out there?
I think so.
Oh, that'd be great.
But
That'd be
that's another couple of years, because they still have to finish the building
good. Yeah,
around the vehicle.
send us a picture of that. Dave Stangy's watching up there in Michigan. He's been with us from the very first weeks. Gary Gerald is, you like Vidalia onions?
Oh yeah.
Well, he grows them in Collins, Georgia
I'll be
area out
darned.
there. Yeah.
I'll probably be eating some of your onions.
Oh yeah. Well, next when he brings me some, I'll call you up.
Yeah,
But,
I do.
Gary, he wants a box of those delicious Vidalia onions there. He's a great guy. We actually had him on here about the farming and how the GPS systems and all that technology has taken over farming. Carlton Bailey, CB, launch photographer.
Yep.
He's out there watching today. Mark and
Mark
Tom
and Tom,
Usiak.
sure.
They had some good questions in little chilly Philadelphia there. CB Spock, we appreciate you watching. Cynthia Rossi, she's in our astronaut club. We go out there and bug Nick Thomas and Mark Smith out there all the time. Steve Jokums, thank you for chiming in from the Lake County Spaceport.
Okay.
Is what he calls his business. He does models and decals for shuttles and other models.
Good for you.
And he calls the Lake County Spaceport up there in Illinois. Tom Celentano, great supporter of our museum up in Connecticut. And Sean plays too much. Okay. Thank you for watching. And we're glad to have some new people on there.
And we got John Weaver.
John Weaver's in here having a great time with us. We appreciate that. We got one last question here from an astronaut, all right? And she is a very special astronaut to you, as she is our museum.
Nikki. Yeah.
Nicole Stott. You know her, most of us know her as Nicole Pisano Stott, and those of us that love her know her as Nikki. She says, as launch director, did you ever wish you could be on the spaceship with us? Parentheses, we would have loved to have had you on the crew.
I wanted to stow away so bad, Nikki, you can't believe it. But no, my job was on the ground, and I had a great job. But I would have loved to have gone with you guys and experienced what you did up there. And I just can't. I live, like vicariously through you all, and I would have absolutely loved to go. I would have gone in a heartbeat, but that wasn't to be.
Well, you'll see that banner that Mike and Nikki have there. That is the actual crew hatch from Discovery.
Yep.
That when you talked at our museum at one of our events, you said you had something you wanted to loan us, and by golly, there's what you're seeing in that very picture right there. Beautiful. They're over by our shuttle gallery there. We have Columbia, or not Columbia. We have Discovery 133, Endeavor 134, and Atlantis 135, signed by the crew and the closeout crew.
Yep.
And I think, again, what separates our museum from others, this is not just a one-of-a-kind thing. This is a historical unit that is one of a kind on there. And Mike, this is how you've supported us. I look at them every day and just think, wow, our humble little museum has things like this in here to share. And it's all because of people like you that get us. Well, we're not ever going to be the biggest or the best. We just want to celebrate space workers and like you.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. And I got to tell you a quick story where those came from. They were the on the hatch, the orbiter hatch. There's a cover to keep the dust out and whatnot, and then these name plaques are velcroed onto the hatch cover. And so this one came off the hatch cover out at the launch pad, and the closeout crew chief Travis,
Travis Thompson,
Travis, he gave me the final three, one for each of the Discovery, Endeavor, and Atlantis missions, and came up to the control room and presented them to me, and that is by far my favorite memento from the shuttle program. It not only is it unique, but it just makes you remember what we did and how special the orbiters were and all the people that worked on them. And gosh, I miss it. I really do.
Well, that was one of our final questions is from Ann Miklos is what do you miss most about the shuttle program was what Ann asked you when we saw her in here today.
Yeah, I like to paraphrase what John Weaver said once. He said, well, I miss the people. Well, I miss about 10% of the people. No, we had a ball out there, and it was one big family, and we like I said earlier, we had softball games together and picnics and
Cars Park is
Cars
deep in their hearts.
It was
places where the park where the employees went.
It was just a terrific team, and even though it was a very, very large team, we all acted with this one thing in mind, was to launch safely and get the astronauts home.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, thank you for a wonderful program. I'm going to show this image here that is kind of a final thought of, let me go forward there, of remembrance of this week. Through tragedy comes the, Phoenix rises again sort of thing. I happened to see Bob Cabana in this room. I think it was Mr. Don Peterson's wake that they were having out there. And he had a silent moment in there. I saw him, and he came up, and I said, sir, can I ask you, what do you feel about this? And he said, One, that they really did it right
Mm-hmm.
in this memorial. He says, I feel like I'm in church when I come in here. And you know, he said, and it's making my arm skin crawl, is these were my friends and I miss them.
Yeah.
You know,
He,
and here's where the world can miss them.
And people that haven't been to the visitor center and the Atlantis attraction and haven't seen this, you really should see it. It's a reminder of what happens when people make bad decisions or no decisions at all. But the point I want to make is, of all the things that Bob Cabana did in his career, and he just retired a couple of weeks ago, 4-time shuttle astronaut, longest serving center director here at KFC, other centers, associate administrator under Bill Nelson. Of all the things he did in his 50-year-long career, that is what he's most proud of. He had, when the Atlantis building was being designed, he had a little area set aside, and he said, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I wanted to do something with Columbia and Challenger, and that's what it turned out to be, and that's his baby.
Well, that's I got an amazing picture of him standing there looking at the American flag there, and it was one of those moments I didn't know if I should take the picture or not. Being a professional photographer, I handled it with you know, professionalism, but that's the piece that you said they took out of the silo.
Yep.
On the left there at the flag, famously there's a picture of it coming out of the ocean.
Yes.
And the windscreen, when you look at it up close, still has pine needles in it and
Sure.
mud.
It's exactly the way we found those window frames out in Texas, and the glass shards in the frame and dirt and mud, like you say. No, we didn't clean up any of the debris. That's exactly the way we found it.
Well, Mike, thank you a lot. Marty, we got any final questions?
Nope, we're good.
Well, we certainly enjoyed spending a little bit of time here with Mr. Mike Leinbach. I know he'll be back in the future and
Sure.
involved in our events that he can support us as you will. Shuttle Fest will be April 13th. We're going to have talk about more than just astronomy missions. Galileo, Ulysses, and the Astro missions had
sure.
a lot of complicated things behind the astronomy going on. So hope you can join us for that. And once again, we want to remind people, if you're local, we will have a beautiful patriotic ceremony and memorial to our 17 fallen heroes and recognize the others. We lost 3 great astronauts this year: Tom Mattingly, Frank Borman, and Mary Cleave. And we will also mention them there. But and
Good.
of course, again, Mike McCulley doing the honors there. Your boss for a while there at United Space Alliance.
He's a good guy.
So thank you again.
Okay, my pleasure.
All right. Any final
Absolutely.
thoughts to anybody out there?
No, stay curious, everybody.
Thank you. Well, until next time, next week, I'm Mark Marquette saying thank you so much for watching our program and taking your time. And we hope to see you again to bridge the space between us.